Hello, let me just share my screen. Okay, so hello everyone, and a very warm welcome to this session. I hope you can see my screen. I'm Darko. I come from Zagreb, Croatia, and I've been doing RPA for more than 5 years, and I've been implementing RPA projects in different industries and across different customer sizes. And lately, I've also co-founded a company, Robotic AI, where I'm co-founder, and we are developing our own RPA platform. So today's talk will be around the lessons that we learned during the last 5 years, and some of these lessons are learned the hard way. And I just hope that it will be relevant for you, but it's also a reminder for me because some of these things that I will show we also tend to forget. So it's a reminder for me as well. So let's get started. I just want to confirm if you see my screen. So can you just comment if you see my screen, just to make it. Can you just confirm that you see my screen? Okay, I'm gonna assume everything is fine. RPA is notorious for being maintenance-heavy technology, and there's always somebody that needs to monitor what's going on. Do the robots work okay? Very often the application changes, so you have to make tweaks to the process, or the business rule changes. So there's always a constant need to fiddle and tweak the processes. And what impacts on this maintenance and ability to scale is several criteria. And that's quality of business analysis and process selection. So how good you are at selecting the right processes, selecting the processes that have a good ROI, and also the quality of the business analysis that you perform. Also, the second criteria is how good do you implement the system, what's the architecture, and how does it work in practice. And lastly, it will depend on quality of communication between all the stakeholders in the process. And that includes process owners, management, IT, security, the team that's implementing. So there are a lot of stakeholders in the process, and the quality of communication between all of them will determine how easy it will be to maintain the system going forward. So the tips I'm going to show are not vendor specific. They do not relate to any specific technology. And I'm going to start with the ones that relate to the implementation side. So the first one is called the less screens, the better. So software robots are meant and are sold in a way that that they mostly operate on UI level, meaning that the robots click through the user interface level. But to be honest, the better you can get them off the UI, the things will work more efficient and more robust. Because if the robot is not using the screens, that means that if something changes in the UI, the robot will not be affected. Also, it will be much more faster in the operation. So a tip is that, of course, use the APIs if they're available. Also, a lot of products on the market already have built-in connectors to different systems, so be sure to leverage those and to check whether there's a default connector to the system. And also, of course, use databases, query statements using views, and so forth. But also, when you think about it, there are a lot of other operations that can be automated in non-UI fashion. So there are a lot of things during the process that you can do that will make it much more efficient and robust. So I will just give you a couple of examples. One is, I don't know if you know, but actually you can connect to an Excel file as a database. So instead of opening an Excel and looping through all the rows, you can actually connect it as if it was a database, and you can issue normal SQL statements. So take a look at an example. For example, you need to find a certain row where first and last name are so and so. So if you iterate through all the rows, you might have to iterate, I don't know, 2,000 rows to come to your needed row. And if you connect to an Excel as a database, you can just type, select everything where first name equals Darko and last name equals Jovišić. And this is much more faster, and it doesn't involve interface, and it's much more robust. So that's just one example. For example, if you want to generate a Word document based on the information you collected from different systems, there is a nice feature in Word called Custom XML, where you can embed XML structure into a Word document and bind it to the fields in the Word. So with this capability, you can quickly generate thousands of documents, and it will be much more faster and much more robust. Also, for example, if you need to download or upload SharePoint documents, so documents to the SharePoint library, you can do it in a UI way. So you can open a web browser, go to document library, click upload, and so and so. But there's also capability to connect the document library as a network drive. So what was, I don't know, a 20-step operation, opening a browser, clicking, and so forth, becomes one-step operation, just copying a file from the local drive to this shared network drive. So it's much more faster and much more robust. Also, converting Word documents to PDF, that can be accomplished using a command line tool, so it does not involve opening the Word file. So I would just suggest that you explore all the different ways you can optimize the process by going off the screen and using non-UI methods. Okay, moving to the second one, it's called splitting the atom. So when you have a big batch of work that needs to be completed, I suggest that you split the work to the finest details. So try to go for the lowest denominator and to get this atomicity and to get the smallest unit of work. So let me give you a very concrete example of this. Suppose you have an Excel file with 3,000 records, and you need to read these 3,000 records and enter them in some application. So the initial idea, of course, would be to create a process and to implement a loop that goes record by record and just enters it in the system. So what's wrong with this approach? What are the flaws? Well, there are a couple of flaws here. First of all, you don't have isolation of errors. So an error can happen on 1,131st row, and the whole process will collapse. And if you try to restart it, it will fail again on the same row. So you have to fix the error. Also, you have to implement the kind of status checking and then checking whether you have already entered this record, so you don't have double bookings. But what's worse is that these 3,000 rows have to be completed all in one process, meaning that, let's say that it takes 1 minute for one record to be inserted. That would mean that the robot has to work for 3,000 minutes, which is equal to two days of non-stop working. So basically, you're blocking every other process from using the robot, and so this is not an optimal way, because there might be some other processes that need to be executed, and they will not have the capacity because you're running this big batch of work. So the idea here is to read the Excel file and generate 3,000 work items for each record to be inserted. The pros of this approach is that you will have isolated transactions. So if something fails, it will fail on a single record, and you will be able to prioritize the work, meaning that, let's say during the day, you would execute the other processes, and these 3,000 work items will be inserted in off-peak hours or at night. And it might take a longer, so it might take, instead of 2 days, it will take 4 days, but you will have the capacity to do other stuff. But also it will require some extra development because you will need to implement this kind of dispatcher worker architecture. Next one, I called it a peek into the black box. It concerns the unattended robots. So the unattended robots work unsupervised. Nobody is watching them. And that makes them very hard to troubleshoot, to diagnose what happened. And you don't have a visual clue on what happened. So you might take a screenshot when the error happened, but that might not be so much informative. Also, you don't have access to the stack trace, meaning you don't see the exact state of all the variables at the step where the error happened. So it's quite hard to troubleshoot on what happened. So you're just guessing what happened, and very often what happens is you just say this is maybe an exception that will not happen again, and you just leave it to luck that it won't happen again. So I think there are some approaches that can help you speed up the process and help you with more tools that can help you analyze what happened. So very often what we do is we implement custom logging databases or local log files where we try to write all the things, all the variables that can help us determine what happened in the process. Also, sometimes we generate documents with screenshots of each step of the process that the robot performed. And this helps you in two ways. First way, you can troubleshoot what happened during the process. And the second, the useful thing about this is that you have an audit trail on what the robot performs. So if somebody tomorrow asks, I want to see the exact steps that the robot took, you have a file that has all the steps that were performed, so you can prove that the robot did the right thing. And lastly, depending on the platform, or you can also have video logs of execution, or you could also implement some kind of your system as well, and have a complete video of this unattended execution. And that will help you, all these things will help you determine what happened in reality with the process. And lastly, I would say avoid using shared credentials. So don't reuse somebody else's credentials, employees' credentials when working with the applications, because you will not be able to distinguish what the employee did and what the robot did. Okay, next one. So nothing is written in stone, and this is not RPA specific, but it's also very much RPA topic, and that goes avoiding hard coding business rules and some kind of configurations into the process itself, and that relates to the conditions and rules which are used in branching and looping statements, and those need to be extracted. Also URLs, server names, file paths, connection strings, and so on. But also some other things such as selectors. So if you are working with a web application or Windows application, very often you use selectors, and it's a good practice also to extract them as well, because they can change in the future. So this really helps you to be more flexible. So try to extract them. And also for the business rules, try to extract them in such a way that the business user can manage them and change them. So it can be simple as an Excel file stored somewhere where the user can change some rule, or it can be in some application where the rules are implemented, or it can be in the orchestrator where you can extract them as global assets or global variables whatever. So this will save you down the line, because if something changes, you will be much more flexible, you'll be much more faster. Also, this goes when you're deploying new machines, you will be able to quickly deploy these new robots. The next one is related to the business users and what they care for. So the process owners don't really care how the process is automated, how it's technically implemented. Have you implemented it as a one monolith process or several sub-processes? They really care about the business outcomes. They really want to see, has this work item or this transaction has been completed. The problem is that the orchestrators or the server components of the RPA products very often focus and display too much technical data, so it's very hard for a process owner to understand what's going on. So what we often end up doing is that we try to implement business user-friendly interfaces where they can track the robot work, where they can get reports and so on. This can be SharePoint lists, database reports, some kind of dashboards in Power BI or any other technology. For example, we can implement a SharePoint list where the robot can update the records and insert records, and it's much easier for the business user to use this interface instead of the orchestrator. So I would really focus on this, because the business users will then likely to embrace and to do the monitoring of the robots instead of having a separate function monitoring the work of the robot and what's being performed. Okay, so we covered the let's say the implementation best practices. Now I want to switch to the kind of business analysis best practices. And the first one I called avoid the ping pong game. So very often in the blueprints, you will see that there's a distinction between the business analyst and an RPA developer. While the skill sets are different, I think it doesn't make sense because RPA is meant to have fast implementation cycles. So we are talking about weeks, and then the biggest processes we've seen taken something like 2 to 3 months. So since they are very small processes, very fast implementation cycles, having separate roles creates friction in communication. Basically, you have a ping pong game between the developer, the business analysis, and the process owner. And this creates a lot of problems because the business analyst does not collect all the technical details, the developer does not have the business context of the process, and so forth. So in my view, it doesn't make sense to have separate roles. They should be combined into one role. And the benefits of this is that you have a single point of contact, you have faster implementation, you don't have this communication friction, and you have more accountability because one person is responsible for the implementation from the business analysis to production. So the downside of this approach is that you will need to find people with broader set of skills. So you will need the people that are able to communicate, but on the other side also have the technical skills to be able to implement the process itself. So the next one is related to the fact that if we use RPA, there's a tendency that we solve all the problems using RPA, and I don't like this approach. I like approach where we take a holistic view on the process automation, and so I like to call myself and my teammates not RPA consultants, but actually automation consultants, because we tend to see it in a broader perspective. So we need to combine different technologies that we have at disposal, what the customer has, to create the optimal solution. And if there is a possibility to improve or optimize the process by leveraging some other technologies, I would definitely go for it. I will give you an example where we had a process in the bank, and the input in the process was email with the word attachment, which was filled out by the employees. Now, this approach is not the best one because You cannot validate the data up front. If the Word document changes, then they need to send out the new version to all the employees. So what we did in the first phase, we implemented a simple form on their intranet portal, and that helped us, to validate the data before coming to the robot, and then we have one point where we can change the form if there are some modifications to be done. And in the next phase, we are going to replace this intranet form and expose the whole process to the customer using the internet banking. So we will further optimize the process and achieve greater benefits for the customer. So I think we should all think of automation in a broader perspective. The next one I call obey the Pareto. So when you talk to the business users and process owners, they want to automate 100% of their process. They want to automate it, and they want to forget about it. They don't want to deal with it anymore. So I would say this is, in most cases, a very dangerous promise to make, because even if they say that the process is simple, there's probably more to it. And there will be a lot of exceptions and branches that you need to cover. So you will end up with a Frankenstein process, which is very hard to maintain, very hard to change, to troubleshoot. And especially, the person who did it, they will understand how maybe to change the process. But if somebody else takes over, they will find it very hard to actually change the process that was implemented. It will end up in a prolonged implementation because there will always be something that you forgot and that the business user forgot, and then it will turn into a nightmare, and you will constantly have to tweak and change the process. So I would try to explain to the process owners and the business users the implication and how the robots work. And I would try to explain them the Pareto rule. So try to implement the 80% of the most frequent cases, and you will spend, the 20% effort to get these 80%. So the rest you can leave back to the employees and how they did it before. And I think this needs to be explained upfront. So when talking about Pareto, so to handle this 20% of these exceptions and cases you don't know about, you have to know about them, and you have to know that they exist and what happens in that case to be able to implement when it happens that the robot returns the work to the employee. So the problem...
I'm sorry, your slides are frozen. If you could turn them off and on again.
Yeah, sure. Is it working now? Is it working? If not, I can switch to the PDF.
Maybe switch to the PDF, yeah.
Okay. Okay. So let me just...
Now.
Okay, perfect. So I don't know, what was the last slide that was shown? Is this the last slide that was working? Okay, I will continue from here. So the thing is that you need to know about this 20%, and the problem is that the employees, the process owners, and the people who are actually performing the process, they will have the process in their heads, and in most cases it will become their second nature, meaning that they are performing this process automatically, and it will be very hard for them to actually, tell you about all these specific things that can happen in the process. It's not that they are hiding information from you. It's just that they forget things. So So I think it's very, very important. You can let them create the initial specification, but be sure that there are more things underneath, and be sure to drill them very hard and ask a lot of questions and open questions and specific questions, and to flush out all these possible exceptions and process branches. So the next one is regarding testing and hypercare and the importance of testing. So if you do not rigorously test your process, and I really mean not in like 10 or 20 examples, I mean in hundreds of examples, you will pay the price in post-production hypercare period. So all the robots, all the processes that go into production, they have this hypercare period where you flush out all the bugs and all the smaller details. So if you do not rigorously test, you will pay the price in hypercare period, but with an added tax. So first of all, you will impose a lot of unnecessary stress on the people. So the team that has implemented the process will be under a lot of strain, and they will need to fix issues immediately. And the second thing, I think, which is more important, there will be loss of credibility, because the process owners will see that the robots are failing often, that they are doing wrong things. So it can damage your ability to scale and the confidence that the business has in this technology. So in the end, you will probably spend much more time in fixing these issues than in the testing period, where you would see these problems and fix them right away. And this is not an easy thing to do, rigorous testing, because it requires tenacity, perseverance, persuasion for the business users, and patience. Because nobody likes testing, especially business users, because they have a ton of work to do. So you have to really convince them why it's important, why they need to devote time to this, and then what will happen in case they don't. So I really strongly suggest that you spend the time in testing, and in some cases you have some deadlines that are pushing you. Try not to really squeeze the testing period, and then in some cases it happens that it goes to production without testing. Really try to avoid these situations. So because of all these things that I mentioned, the testing and then the business analysis that needs to be done thoroughly, I think the old normal is way better, because RPA is quite communication intensive, customer intensive, and therefore the best results are achieved in on-site engagements. And this is especially important in the beginning and the last stages before the production. We have experience during the last year and a half working in a remote work, and I'm not so sure about the results. I think it would be done much better if we were on site. And some of the consequences that we had is that we have longer implementation cycles, we have a miscommunication with the business users, and especially, I would say, lack of dedication, because you say, we need to test this, but they, it's different when they get an email, and it's different when you have them in the room and they're devoted to the thing they're doing now. And also, it's lack of visibility. So when you're on site, you're mingling with the people, you're talking to them, and kind of word spreads around. When you're remote, it's kind of far from the eyes, it's far from the heart. So it's very hard to achieve this visibility. So I can't wait for the things to go back to the old normal, even if remote work is better for my work-life balance. So the second topic is next advices are related to scaling. So the term software robot, whoever coined this term, I think gave us a blessing and a curse. So the curse is when you say robot, people of course tend to think that they will lose their jobs because of the robots. But on the other side, the robots is word robot is very interesting. It provokes interest in people, and there is a tendency of people to actually give names to these robots, a human name, and even if it's a piece of software or application like any other. So I would say try to use that fact and try to name your robot. So here on the picture you can see a robot a name that we gave to a robot for one of our customers. It's an Italian company, so the robot is called Roberto. So it makes the whole technology, whole initiative much more visible. It kind of also downplays this fear of losing the job, but it also, you can use this whole thing to run marketing campaigns and events. And the goal is to get more process candidates. So this Roberto mascot here has a box where employees can put their suggestions for process automations and so on. So it will provide you with the ability to raise the visibility and awareness about the technology. It will also give you opportunity to address employee concerns. So we had an event where the CEO and the whole senior management gave important messages that they will not lose their jobs and so forth. And it will also give you a lot of process candidates for the future. So you have this roadmap and processes that you can scale upon. So also one thing when you start scaling is that change management becomes a topic. So when you have 50, 100 processes automated, if some application changes, it will have an impact on a severe impact on your deployment. So what is important here is that you establish a communication channel and procedure with the IT and all other stakeholders that they announce these changes to you. So it doesn't happen like all of a sudden the robot is not working and the business users are pissed off, and only to find out that some screen has changed and that you didn't know about that. So this there has to be a change management procedure, and you have to be notified upfront and to have enough time to assess the impact that this change will have on your processes. Okay, so the next one that can help you with this change management is the deployment checklists. So basically, before going to production, you need to list out all the dependencies for the process. So that includes a list of applications and their versions, frameworks, all the underlying applications that you are using, all the necessary files, folder structure, and so forth. Also network ports and firewall permissions if you are using APIs or database calls or so forth. And this will not be needed so much when you're initially doing the deployment because you have it in your small finger and you know what to do. But this will be very important when you will be adding new robots or new machines and you need to deploy this machine, because you will forget about all these small things that you've done. So this deployment checklist will remind you of all the dependencies you need to deploy before starting your process. And this will avoid the situation where you add a new machine and the process starts failing on that machine. Also, it will help you assess the impact of changes that happens in the application, because you will have a checklist for each process and you will be able to quickly identify which processes are impacted by the change in a certain application. So this is best done while it's still fresh in your memory. So be sure to do it once you're initially deploying the process, not like weeks later or months later, because you're definitely going to forget about the small things. Okay, and the last slide. There is a tendency, I would say this really bugs me a lot. There's a tendency to overemphasize the importance of technology. So I've been often included in debates, whether this technology is better or this vendor is better, and this feature is missing, and so forth. And I think it is important, but the people part or the team part often gets neglected. And I would state that skilled and experienced people can deliver excellent projects even if they are not using the top 3 vendor from the Gartner quadrant. And so I would like to share a small story. So 6 years ago, when I was starting RPA, we started delivering a project for a bank, and we were deciding on the tool. And at that time, you can see this Forrester wave, and we decided to go with Softomotive, which was not even in top 10 of the vendors in that picture. But the tool was good. And what was really good is that the vendor was at that time very fast and flexible, and then we could communicate really fast. So we ended up deploying this technology, and it still works to date with the large scale deployment. So we are talking about 100 processes running on 10 unattended robots. So I would say, really try to also evaluate the people part as the technology part. So some tips there is, make sure that if you have external team or external vendor that's doing the implementation, make sure that all the people that were listed on the proposal are they in fact the ones that will be performing the project. Also, hiring a brand name implementator does not guarantee quality, but actually the people that are doing the project will guarantee this quality. And I would focus on the people references and not the company references, because maybe the people that deliver this large brand references might not longer be with the company. So also, I think there's a tendency from the customer side to go more into the commercial summary and the technology, but I would also pay attention to the proposal in detail and how they envision the processes, how they intend to automate, what is the architecture of these processes, and then to see have they really thought about how they are going to approach the project. Also, I would verify the satisfaction of the customer base and what other customers are saying, because it might happen that other references are just POCs or pilots or failed projects. And lastly, I would emphasize the importance of interviewing the team members. So when we are hiring a full-time employee, we go to a lengthy process of 1, 2, 3 phases of talks. But when we are getting an external offer, whether it be a contractor or a company, we do not focus that much on interviewing these members. So I would really deep dive into their experience, their thinking, and see that are they really a fit for the project. So this was all the tips that and advices that I had for you. There are much more, but considering the time limitation, this is what I wanted to share with you. So with this, I would like to thank you for your attention and open the floor to questions and your feedback. And also, if you have any additional questions, you can contact me via email or add me on LinkedIn, whatever channel is appropriate to you. And I would also ask you to fill out the polls that I will publish now. So fire away. So do you have any questions or comments on this and the advices I gave? So we have a question. Is the robotization of business process beneficial for the banking sector? Yes, very much. for several reasons. I think the banks are a sweet spot for RPA, and they were actually the first ones to embrace this technology in a big way. And I would have to say, because of one big factor, that banks have very heterogeneous IT landscape, meaning that they have tens and maybe hundreds of applications, which are, from ranging from very old ones to modern ones. So in a typical bank, you might find, even the old IBM mainframe green screens to modern applications, which makes it very hard for banks to automate and integrate systems, and that's where RPA comes very good, because we can integrate all these different systems and automate the process for the business users. So I hope I answered your question. Are there some other questions? So what is the best way to screen for possible partners? So I would, if I was on the buying side, I would invite the partner to perform a POC, but I would like to be involved in the process and to really see how they're dealing with issues, how they're thinking, and how their team members are performing the whole POC. So I would gauge their competency and their references during this POC process. So for me, POC would not be only strictly to see, can we automate the process and does the technology work, but also to see whether the partner is the right one for you as well. So I would really also prepare for the POC much more than from the, let's say, technical standpoint. Also, try to talk to other players in the industry and to see their experiences, their recommendation, their advices as well. And then definitely you can find them on these conferences such as RPA Europe or on some industry-specific conferences. So I would try to mingle with people and to check, what are good companies to collaborate with. I hope that gives you a good insight into this question. So any other questions? Okay, so if not, I would like to thank you for your attention. I'm sorry about the glitch, but it seems that all the speakers have some issues with the system, so I'm sorry about that. And I hope you got most of the presentation from my side. So enjoy the rest of the conference and hope to connect with you on different channels. Bye-bye.